Welcome to episode 62 of the High Volume Hiring Podcast. I am Stephen Rothberg with College Recruiter. I'm the founder of this merry little band, and I guess this podcast. This podcast definitely took a significant improvement when my co-host joined.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jeanette Leeds. I'm Executive Vice President at AMS. And for episode 62, getting up there in numbers, we are joined today by Torin Ellis, which is totally awesome. For those who don't know Torin, he is a consultant, a coach, an advisor, a speaker, and I would say, as my friend DJ M Squared would say, a mood designer. So Torin, welcome.
Yeah, and since Steve said the band, I'm going to play percussionist today. I'm going to tap into my youthful days when I played percussions in our church choir. So I'll make sure we are on rhythm for the duration of the conversation.
Well, I played the tuba in high school, so I think I'm much more excited to hear percussion than to hear my tuba.
Most people are.
Yeah, definitely. As a huge live music fan, I'm like, bring it.
There you go.
That's awesome. Well, why don't we kick it off? Just like quick, I obviously give an intro, but like just for those who don't know you, which to me would sort of be crazy, but just quick like background, what you do, and then we can get into our topic, which is around measuring engagement and mandating the outcome and progress around.
Absolutely. Love forces us to remove the mask that we live within and fear that we cannot live without. Love forces us to remove the mask that we live within and fear that we cannot live without. Said by Mr. James Baldwin. And I start there because no matter how I enter into a conversation, enter into a room, enter into a recording, I'm always operating off of the two most powerful words in our lexicon, love and process. And so I want people to know, no matter what it is that I say, I defer to love. That is my first language. That's my first position. So if I'm consulting, if I'm advising, if I'm coaching, if I'm speaking, I am trying to do such with a cadence and a tenor of love.
Wow. I was about to say we should just end there because that's like the high note, but we're definitely going to dig in here.
I wanted to say I love that.
Yeah.
That was like my reaction.
It's beautiful. So Torin, before we kind of got on, we were talking about, and I think Jeanette kind of alluded to it, the different things that we want to talk with you about. One of the things that I've heard you talk about a number of times is employee engagement. In my mind, that matters a lot, whether a company has 3 employees or 30 or 300 or 3,000 or 30,000. Talk with us about how do you measure engagement? Because it's one thing to say, I want my employees to be engaged. It's another thing to know that. How do you know if they're engaged?
Yeah, I think the first way we know they're engaged is through conversation. And there's this saying out that says you cannot not communicate. So whether I'm silent or I'm audible, I am communicating something. I am emitting a signal to my colleagues, to my leader, whether or not I am affirming something, pushing away something, if you will, participatory in something. I have reservation around something. And so I think the first way that we measure engagement truly is through the degree and level of communication inside of our business unit, department, and our team. I know this is a short recording, so I'm not going to labor that point, but communication, the frequency, the depth, the dimension, the expansiveness of communication is extremely important. The second way that I look at engagement is through productivity. Even if an individual productivity is lacking, it tells me something. And so I get to see, well, what's going on with that individual? Why are they week over week or month over month or quarter over quarter not performing the way that they were performing last year? Is there something happening in their personal life, their family life, their community? Is there something going on in the workplace that maybe they haven't disclosed to me? It goes back to the first point of communication. The more connected I am to you, Jeanette, the more I'm going to talk and tell you. The more connected and familiarity and relationship that I have with you, Steve, the more I'm going to talk to you. And so we can have that conversation around boosts or lags in productivity. And then last but not least, do I stay? Do I stay? Like, if is there positive retention inside of the organization? Not forced retention, not I don't have any other options retention. Is there positive retention inside of the organization? Or said a different way, is there positive attrition? Meaning, Steve, you are doing an incredible job of grooming and developing individuals. And so you are pushing people off into the organization. Jeanette, the work that you do as a leader pushes people in a direction where they really want to grow with an organization. So for me, engagement comes down to communication, production, and retention.
Going back to the theme of love at the beginning, again, I love everything you're saying. So two things, I've like sort of a two-part question almost. One, does that change if it's in an environment where an organization is doing a ton of high volume recruiting, hiring, like at scale versus maybe smaller organizations where, hey, you have a smaller team, and if you could almost weave in that the beginning statement around love, like it pervades everything. And does that make a difference? What's just coming to mind, does that make a difference in sort of how you communicate in a way? My brain just went in two directions there.
Yeah. So what I will say to you in responding to your question, Jeanette, I don't know if it changes, and yes, it does. But here's what I need people to understand is it doesn't have to. You see, here's what's most important. In some organizations, they may care less about engagement, and they may be more satisfied with the hamster wheel of hiring individuals, just replacing individuals. They could care less about some of this Pollyannish talk that Torin has. There are other organizations where in high volume, they subscribe to something similar to what I say. But what I'm suggesting to our listeners is that it doesn't have to change. Whether I'm a low volume organization or a high volume organization, I need to have some degree of communication with my individuals. I want people to know that I care about them being here. Whether it's a warehouse job where tens of thousands of people are doing it, we're hiring thousands of individuals on a yearly basis, or whether it's a very small accounting team, I want you to know that I care about you, that I'm going to develop you. I'm going to inspire, resource, and support you as a leader. That may look different. That communication modality may be a little bit different. It may not be face-to-face. It may be through text message. It could be through some sort of chat bot. But I want people to know that it doesn't have to change. I need you to know that I'm focused on your production, that I want you to stay inside of our organization. I mean, why is it that we continue to go year after year after year positing on what it costs to hire individuals and not necessarily saying that we're going to do something different to change that arrangement and or that outcome? So if it costs me $3, $5, $7, $10, $20,000 to bring you in, then I should do everything that I can to keep you here, provided that you belong here. You deserve to be here. You're contributing here. So I think the real question is, does it have to change?
One of the things that you touched on a little bit earlier, and my words, not yours, and please push back if I'm mischaracterizing, but it seems like part of a way that you're talking about measuring engagement is both qualitative and quantitative. It's what you're saying, the feelings, the emotions, what you're sharing. It's also just the number of times you're communicating. So, I'm picturing somebody in like a warehouse who just is very quiet, does their own thing, shows up, punches in, does their job, goes home, right? In my mind, there's very little engagement there, qualitative or quantitative. Somebody else who shows up and is continuously talking to their boss. How do I do this? How do I do that? I've got a better way of doing this. I got a better way of doing that. There's a lot of quantity there. But I wonder how many managers know how to measure the quality of that engagement. Do you have tips for managers for going beyond just how many times did I interact with this person, or did they interact with others, versus did that interaction contribute to their productivity, to the team?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things that I want to say, Steve. Let me bounce around a little bit. Number one, I think that we do a terrible job as recruiters. We have a low barrier of entry to get into our discipline. You don't necessarily have to have a degree or be certified. There's not a lot of academic coursework that needs to take place. So there are a lot of individuals that get into the recruiting space and then ultimately may move into leadership managerial positions, and they haven't had a lot of formal training. I'm not knocking them. That's just the way that it is. But in our industry, we have historically, in my opinion, we've used phrases, we've spouted out some of these data points in a way that is not all that productive. We look at resumes for 6 seconds. That's not productive. We have average retention these days of 18 months. That's not productive.
Yeah, and if it's fast food, it's like
we're in a war for talent. This is not war. I've been close to the front lines of war in my military days. This is no damn war. So I think that we first and foremost need to really recognize that if you are going to, or if you are a leader who leans more on the qualitative versus the quantitative, or vice versa, that may be a signal that you need some development as a leader. So for that individual who's quiet in the warehouse, they're more introvert, they're more to themselves. I would find out as their leader, is it because you're an introvert? And if you are, I might recommend a book by Susan Cain titled Quiet, to help them become more out of their shell as a leader, to become a better leader. But that's what happens when you have an incredible consultant like myself supporting the organization. Yes, I care about diversity and inclusion, but what I care about more are building high-performing teams and doing that in a way that chases humanity. So I am doing everything that I can, whether I'm in a small organization, medium-sized organization. How do I help leaders be better leaders? I'm not suggesting that leaning on qualitative is better or worse than quantitative, but what I am suggesting is that probably being somewhere in the middle is going to be better for the masses of your team. You want to be able to ebb and flow through the masses of your team and not just stay on the fringes of what leadership looks like. And in order for you to get there, that takes development, that takes discipline and learning as a leader. Just because you've been elevated doesn't mean that you possess all of the acumen and experience to be able to model what good leadership looks like.
I completely agree with all of that. It makes so much sense. I think we have time for maybe one more quick question. Well, I'll grab it because you got the last one, Steve. I guess just to almost bring, I'm all about like practical examples. So maybe you could give like a practical example, more because we're the high volume podcast, but something in high volume of like maybe a quick tip or something that, our listeners could just take home, and obviously nothing can just like quickly get implemented. But maybe just an example can get people really thinking, some sort of specific that you've seen.
Yeah. The one thing that I would say is treat people like they matter. I remember the days in which I worked at MCI Communications. We had 500 individuals.
Ooh, you are dating yourself, my friend.
I am. I ran one of the top sales teams in the entire country. Now, here's the deal, Jeanette. I'm cheating a little bit because I'm collecting all of the individuals in that building. But there were 500 individuals in that building. And there became a time where I was a leader. For my 20 individuals, of course, I'd say good morning. We do our pre-shift, we get started and hitting our sales cycle like we're supposed to. But at some point, I'm walking that entire building and I'm tapping people on the back of the shoulder, saying good morning, good afternoon, how are you? Hopefully you had a great day. What'd you have for breakfast? What's the lunch plans? Any challenges in your sales agenda? I made people in that building feel like they mattered. And I think even in high volume, we can find a cadence, a way of making people feel like they're important, not just another number, not just another body, but they are important in our mission and our KPI and what it is that we are doing. And I am willing to bet that the leaders that are doing that are more often than not the successful leaders.
I agree. And for me, hearing that, it's because they do matter, right? It's not like this, hey, do it because you want to make them feel that way. It's because they do. It's real. They contribute to the bottom line or whatever, as you said, the mission. So it's awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on today's podcast. I feel like we could keep going and going and going.
I know we don't have a whole lot of time, and I didn't mean to talk over you. I just want to share, there is no fairy dust. I understand that organizations come out with all of these, management consultants come out with some of these incredible formulas, and we are looking for the latest and greatest, shiniest tool. But in the end, it comes down to connectedness of humanity. And so there is no fairy dust. It really is basic blocking and tackling. If I treat you like you matter, you are going to run through brick walls for me in my organization.
That is so true. And I am like, my head is being filled with memories of little things that my best managers did. And like that, going through the building, what's for lunch today? It's been 30 years since one of those managers, since I worked for him. And just now I realized what he was doing, because I could totally picture him doing that. Every morning he'd come in, just pop into my cube, and for the other people who reported to him, how you doing? Did you go to this thing last night? How was school today? Whatever it was for each person. And it was just like a very short conversation. And looking back on it, absolutely, that's what he was doing. He was making sure that we each knew that he cared about us as people. And it also opened the door, because if we had an issue that we wanted to talk about, good, bad, or ugly, right then and there, or, hey, can I come talk to you in an hour? Yeah, he was treating us as humans. God forbid. Awesome. Jeanette, another great episode. Torin, you are the master, my man.
Yeah.
Thank you both for having me. I appreciate you for trusting my voice.
Cheers.
Take care, everyone.